Have you ever agreed to something and then, like, an hour later you're sitting there thinking, wait, why did I say yes to that? Well, what if I told you it's not random? There's actually a science to it. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on the psychology of persuasion, using Dr. Robert Cialdini's incredible work to find those hidden triggers that secretly guide our decisions.
All right, to kick things off, I've got a story for you. It's about a little jewelry store in Arizona. And what happened there, well, it just makes no sense on the surface. But it's a perfect little mystery that tells us so much about how our brains really work.
So get this. The store has this really nice turquoise jewelry, but it just will not sell. I mean, it's peak tourist season, people are everywhere, and nothing. The owner tried everything, moving it to a better display case, having the staff really push it, but it just sat there collecting dust. So, finally, completely fed up, she's about to leave for a trip, and she just scribbles this note to her head salesperson that says, "Everything in this display case, price times 1/2. You know, just sell it, I don't care, get rid of it." But her handwriting was so messy that the salesperson read it as price times 2.
A few days later, the owner comes back and she is absolutely shocked to see that the display case is empty. Every single piece is gone. But the real kicker? She finds out it all sold for double the price. How on earth does that happen, right? It's completely backward. And this little accident is the perfect setup for our first big idea.
The reason that crazy outcome was even possible is because our brains are basically built for laziness, in a good way. We can't sit around and analyze every little decision we have to make all day, so we use mental shortcuts. Cialdini has this great name for it, the click-whir response. It's like an old tape recorder. Something specific happens, that's the click, and it automatically triggers a pre-recorded tape of behavior, that's the whir.
The fancy scientific term for this is a fixed action pattern, and for those tourists buying the jewelry, the click was the super high price tag. Their mental shortcut, the whir, was a simple rule they'd learned over their lifetime: expensive equals good. They weren't turquoise experts, so instead of trying to become one on the spot, they just let the price do the thinking for them. Clip, whir, sold.
And you know, these triggers can be shockingly simple. On the left here, you see this thing with mother turkeys. They're programmed to nurture anything that makes a cheep cheep sound. So they'll attack their natural enemy, a polecat, on sight, unless a stuffed one has a recorder inside that goes cheep cheep. Then they'll treat it like their own baby. Our triggers are kind of like that too. Look at the right. In one study, you were 34% more likely to get to cut in line for a copy machine if you just used the word because, even if your reason was totally dumb, like because I need to make copies. The word itself was the trigger. Click, whir.
So here's where it gets really interesting. These automatic triggers can actually be used to influence us. Cialdini calls them weapons of influence. And the first one, it's a big one. It's reciprocation. It's that incredibly powerful, deep-down feeling that you have to repay a favor. It creates a debt that we feel desperate to settle.
This quote really says it all. The need to reciprocate isn't just about being polite. It's a core part of being human. It's a force so strong that it can make people act against their own immediate best interests, all to repay a perceived debt. It's one of the things that holds society together. And if you want to see just how powerful it is, look at this timeline. In 1985, Ethiopia was in the middle of a horrifying famine and a brutal civil war. Yet, they sent $5,000 in aid to Mexico City after an earthquake. Why? Why would they do that? Because 50 years earlier, in 1935, Mexico had sent them aid. A debt half a century old was repaid under the worst possible conditions. That right there is the power of reciprocation. All right, let's move on to weapon number 2, which builds on this. This one is all about our obsession with being consistent. Once we've made a choice or taken a stand, we feel this immense internal and external pressure to stick with it, to make all our future actions line up with that first decision. Okay, so picture this. A researcher knocks on your door and asks if you'd be willing to put this huge, absolutely hideous, drive carefully sign on your perfect front lawn. I mean, it's big, it's ugly, the letters are all crooked. Unsurprisingly, most people said no way. Only about 17% agreed. But for another group, the researchers tried out a little something different first. So 2 weeks before asking about the giant ugly sign, a different volunteer went to this other group of homeowners and asked them to display this tiny little sticker. It was just 3 inches square, and it said, "Be a safe driver."
It was such a small, easy request that almost everyone said, sure, why not? And that tiny little yes was the key that unlocked everything.
Just look at the results on this chart. It's staggering. Again, only 17% of people said yes to the big sign out of the blue. But for the group who first agreed to that tiny sticker, a whopping 76% said yes. It's insane. That one tiny initial commitment changed how they saw themselves. They were now the kind of person who supports safe driving, and they stayed consistent with that new identity, even when the request got huge.
This next one is a weapon of influence you see, literally every single day. It's called social proof. It's the powerful and usually unconscious idea that if a whole bunch of other people are doing something, well, it's probably the right thing for us to do too.
It's a simple shortcut, right? When we're not sure how to act, we just look around and see what everyone else is up to. Is a restaurant packed with people? It must be good. Does a product have thousands of 5-star reviews? It must be worth buying. We use the behavior of the crowd as proof that we're making the right choice. It's just easier that way.
So just how powerful is this herd mentality? Well, think about this amazing study. It focused on preschool kids who were really withdrawn. They were so shy that they were totally isolated from the other kids. They just stand on the sidelines during playtime, never joining in, which, as you can imagine, is a pattern that can cause major problems later in life.
So, what did the researchers do? They showed these kids a 23-minute movie. That's it. The movie just showed other kids playing together, sharing, and having a good time. And the results were, well, they were unbelievable. After watching that one short film, these withdrawn children started playing with their peers at a totally normal level. Just seeing other kids do it was enough social proof to completely reverse this deep-seated behavior. Wow.
Okay, so we know these principles are out there, and we know they're incredibly powerful. So the real question becomes, what do you do about it? How do you protect yourself when these tactics are being used on you, maybe by someone who doesn't have your best interests at heart?
Cialdini calls the solution a kind of influence jujitsu. The idea isn't to fight back against these principles. They're actually useful shortcuts most of the time. The trick is to learn how to recognize when they're being activated on purpose by, say, a clever advertiser or a pushy salesperson. Just that moment of recognition, oh, I see what's happening here, can be enough to break the spell and let you make a conscious choice.
So let's wrap it up. The main thing to remember is that our brains are constantly on autopilot, and that's not a bad thing, but now you know what to look for. So when someone gives you a free gift out of the blue, recognize that little pang of obligation for what it is, a reciprocation trigger. Before you say yes to a tiny request, pause and ask yourself what the next request might be. And when you see something is super popular, just take a second to ask, is this crowd real or was it faked with fake reviews?
Your best defense is simply awareness. Once you start looking for these principles, you'll see them absolutely everywhere, in politics, in the office, in the ads you watch. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. Now that you can see the strings, who's pulling them in your life?